So now moving on to the individual senses. So the vestibular, this here is the receptor that is located on either side of your head, about just inside from your ears. You've got two of them. This here is your auditory receptor, your cochlear receptors, and for your hearing. Then this completely joins on. It's one system. They call it the vestibular cochlear system because they're joined together. You've got your utricle and your saccule. Now this is important because these are filled with like a jelly-like substance and little calcium carbonate rocks. And so they detect movement that goes up and down, side to side, in whatever direction. And so we call this linear movement. And you might have heard people say that linear movement tends to be calming. And so kids who are rocking back and forth on a board, kids who are swinging, even kids who are rocking on their chair, they're really trying to regulate themselves, stimulating that part of the vestibular system. Then these bony circles we call semicircular canals, and they're filled with a thin fluid and tiny little hair cells. And so what happens is that as you change your head position, as you accelerate, as you decelerate, as you spin, as you rotate, this system is clearly stimulated. Now, many of our children, when they are out playing in the playground, or they're moving a lot, or in their big spaces, they get hyperactive and they don't calm down very well. Have any of you guys got kids like that? Yeah. And so that's because this system is not working like it should. Those same children are often, but not always, calmed down by the linear movement. Sometimes we have kids who are totally dysregulated and hyperactive by both. And then we've got some kids who are just totally frightened. And so any movement frightens them, any heights frighten them. And they get huge anxiety. And no matter how much somebody tries to encourage them or push them, there's a lot of pushback in there. They're very resistant. So this system is very important for muscle tone. So muscle tone is the resting tension of the muscles, and you've got fibres that sit about here in a normal person. And then when the muscles contract, they come in and they relax again. When you've got low muscle tone, the fibres are sitting further apart. And so when they contract, they have to come in a lot longer, and then they come out a lot longer. So these kids are floppy, really hard to sit up. They're lying around the floor at group time, or they're kind of moving all the time. Some of these kids are fine when they're moving. Other kids avoid the movement. So it's very individual. So that's muscle tone. We all know balance, what that is. Coordination. Visual tracking is your ability to follow moving objects with your eyes, or to be able to move your eyes along something. So really important for ball skills, really important for like reading, for copying from the board. So kids who have problems with this eye tracking, will often really struggle with the reading and the writing. They get quite frustrated with it. You see them jumping words and skipping lines. Rhythm. So you'll see kids who they can kind of do movements, but they lack what we call rhythmicity, and they can't keep it going, and they can't keep it going smoothly. And you'll see their handwriting is all stilted, their gross motor movements are all stilted. Integration of primitive reflexes. So this is movement patterns that come when we're infants. They're supposed to disappear when we get a bit older, and they haven't. And then bilateral, or two sides use of the body, the brain and the eyes. So any kid who cannot cut, any kid who cannot do star jumps, when they're old enough, of course, we're talking about 3-year-olds. We're talking about kids who are 5 up. If they can't do star jumps, if they can't cut with scissors, if they can't thread with beads, if they can't do their buttons, we're looking, there's something going on with this vestibular system. Section. So this provides information about where the parts of the body are in space and how they're moving. And so it's got receptors inside the muscles, in the joints, and in the skin. So kids stimulate this through things like the monkey bars, through things like climbing, through things like running and body slamming into pillows or onto mattresses, the couch, the bed, constantly hanging off you is another thing that they'll do. And so it's really, really important for the regulation of all of the other sensory systems. And so as a therapist, if in doubt, I will get the child to do things that stimulate this proprioceptive system because it will usually calm them right down. If I'm trying to get a child calm from being hyperactive, from running around, I will use proprioception. If I'm trying to get a child to cope with doing something difficult, I will use proprioception. Now, what do our kids with anxiety do? They go to this, don't they? They're squeezing their body. They're chewing on their collars to get that proprioception through their jaw. They're chewing their hat strings. They're chewing their pencils. They're really craving that. You'll see them rocking on their chair. You'll see them pulling themselves up. So they're kind of naturally seeking out these proprioceptive things to help them. So have you guys seen that in your kids? So proprioception is also very important for your balance reactions, to have adequate motor skills, self-control, self-esteem, emotional awareness. So the signs of vestibular throat dysfunction, because we actually put these together, the systems are so closely related that you can't really separate them. So behaviours can be at one extreme or the other. The kid can be super, super sensitive, or they can be super, super extreme. They can be settled and calmed by vestibular probe information, or they can be super hyperactive. So there's a whole range of what you can see. And it affects the child a lot. So I'd say probably at least 75% of the kids who come here would have issues with this. And because it affects their handwriting, it affects their sport, it affects their self-esteem, it affects their ability to be able to read other people's facial expressions. Because if you can't feel your face, it's hard for you to know how you're feeling, let alone how someone else is. It's got huge implications. So the kids will also show anxiety symptoms. So, and it's usually because they find things too hard or too tiring. Kids with these issues will tend to have to think their way through everything. And so when things are so hard for them, they just want to give up. Defensive kids, which is the ones who are too sensitive, they tend to be cautious and avoidant and show a lot of anxiety. So the kinds of things you'll see. Now as I'm talking, just put like a tip about anything that actually applies to the child. So no attempt to catch themselves when falling. They've got a diminished parachute reflex. So the parachute reflex is where kids will fall and they'll catch themselves with their hands. It's why kids tend to break their arms a lot, because their hands are what's supposed to protect them. Where there is a diminished parachute reflex, what will happen is they'll actually catch themselves with their face. And so I just had one kid I worked with several years ago now, and his mum told me that every time he would fall, he would have grazes all over his face. And we were like, oh, this shouldn't be happening. So we treated it as a vestibular system. And she was so excited that she told me that she could actually, he actually hurt his hand instead of his face. And I went, yes. They'll bump into things and trip over things. So I've got kids who are actually quite good climbers. And then they'll be walking over and there'll be something on the floor and they'll just trip and fall. And there's no good reason. They just do it constantly. And the parents are like, just look where you go, will you? They'll judge space poorly. So a little boy I had yesterday, I had my basket down and he literally walked into it, fell over, and then said, why did you put that there? And it had been there for like half an hour. Doesn't know how to move in space. Low surfaces can appear really high to them. So climbing steps can seem like they're climbing cliffs. They'll climb holding on. And so you'll see this, like, especially with the littlies, they're holding onto the stair rails while they're climbing up. and then they're clinging as they're climbing down. They also cannot tell if the world is moving. So I had one kid who used to get a swinging feeling. Anytime like a flag or those wobbly men would move, she'd feel sick in her stomach because she couldn't tell whether she was moving or the world was moving. And so we treated the system and that settled. Very alarmed when pushed or moved unexpectedly. And so these kids can be really, really cautious in the playground, and it affects boys more than girls because girls tend to be a little bit quieter, but these boys will tend to be standing back and complain that the other boys are too rough for them, and they just don't get involved.
Is that why they might react like quite angrily if someone accidentally just walks past them?
That's exactly why. So it can be vestibular, that can also be tactile, because if somebody bumps them and they're like, rah! Because it's that fright, flight, fight response. And it's like they're so wired that it doesn't take much to trigger them. And they perceive it as a threat, even though it wasn't intended that way. So they just look, they're confused in a big spatial environment. And so you'll often see that if you're going into a big space, they kind of like wander around. They might trail their hands along a wall. They just kind of look lost. Does that make sense? Or they'll just, there's something big that they have to climb that in the way, and instead of trying to walk around it like anybody else would do, they just kind of look to it as like, what do I do now? And another example like that we use at the gym is they want to have a swing put up, and they'll just stand there and they'll say, it's over there, and they're just stuck, they're clueless about how to get things where they belong. So that's that lot. They hesitate going down curbs or steps. That's a really big one for them. These kids don't tolerate stress very well, and they tend to be very, very anxious. And on top of that, they'll often need their lives to be organised for them. So they've often got executive function challenges, which some of you might have heard about. It's the front part of the brain that's involved in planning, organising, impulse control, behavioural control, working memory, initiation, organising of their world. So these kids tend to have huge issues with this. And they'll see like a trail of things behind them, and they'll forget everything that they need. They'll forget their hats, they'll forget their shoes, they'll forget their books. So it doesn't work for them very well. So that's the vestibular process, and I see quite a lot of nods for you around that. So key strategy, we're going to cover strategies a lot more later, but just a key strategy for the vestibular pro.
Can you have physical disability, like the first couple tick and then the rest wasn't, but like if you had mild cerebral palsy or other things, there might be not so much appropriate issues. It's that they.
So cerebral palsy is a problem in the central part of the brain, what we call the central nervous system, and it causes the spasticity usually. Sometimes there's hypotonia as well, which is the floppiness, but usually it's the hypotonia, which is the increased tone. And because of the increased tone, it will affect the body awareness, but there's another reason for it other than we call it the soft neurological signs, which this refers to. Does that make sense? Yeah. And when you're looking at this stuff, if you've got one or two things, you're like, oh yeah, and usually you can work around it. If you have got multiple symptoms, you're like, yeah, we probably have a sensory processing disorder here. Does that make sense? This would, and it really looks like they've got major vestibular probe issues. Where if it's just one or two things, you're like, nah, maybe mild.
Okay, so before you go on, I think you're about to give us a key strategy. And
Wasn't I? I got distracted, didn't I? So, key strategy is that you want to acknowledge that it's scary for the child, and you want to give them tasks that they can just do. And so, for example, if they're really fearful of climbing, You might go to a park where there is just small climbing things, and then support the child from the hips, because if their hips are supported, they actually feel quite secure, rather than up here where they can't really move their trunk properly. If you hold the hips, they can move their body freely and develop the systems they need to, and they feel safe. And then, as they master it, you're like, who did it? You're like, I did. You're trying to avoid doing that. Yay, you're amazing! And you're aiming for them to feel the sense of mastery themselves, that I did it, rather than Mummy's pleased with me. Does that make sense? And it's so exciting when you see kids do this in the clinic, because they're like, I did it! I'm like, yeah, you did. And then that builds that confidence to try again next time. Now, one of the worst things you can do is force them through it or bribe them through it. You just need to have it at the just right challenge that they build up to each subsequent step. Now, another really useful thing to do is have a notebook with you or a little mini whiteboard, and just say, we're going to choose 3 activities to do. You choose the first one, I'll do the second, you do the third one. And then your activity is something that they're confident that they can do. But it will push them just a little bit. Does that make sense? And then over time you might choose more, or they'll be braver. So, yes?
You mentioned chewing, like the kids chewing their shirt collars and hamstrings, and things like that being often a sign of this. Can it be a sign of something else?
It's not so much a sign of this vestibular probe. It's more a sign that they're using this probe to calm themselves down.
Yeah.
And why is that?
Yeah.
And usually it's a sign of anxiety. So we have kids who, like in kindy, they were not chewing at all. There was never a problem. They get to prep, everything's in the mouth. And it's usually because things are really hard for them and they're trying to regulate. But it's not necessarily a sign of that. If you saw that and all these other symptoms, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, but if you saw that alone, it doesn't. Okay.
No. It's just that we all use sensory strategies, and this just happens to be a really powerful one. I mean, how many of us go to the gym and feel really good after lifting weights? Not everybody, but there's a certain percentage of people who found this feels really good, and they don't have a problem with this, but it's just something they feel good. How good do you feel after going for a walk? So does that make sense?
Yeah.